Welcome to Enlightened Wealth Strategies, the podcast where insight and knowledge meet opportunity. Please join us as we navigate the world of finance, discovering actionable strategies to help you achieve your personal financial goals.
With decades of combined experience, we're here to shed light on the topics that matter most to your financial well-being. Whether you're accumulating, preserving, or distributing your wealth, this is the place for you.
Now let's dive in and start your journey to financial enlightenment.
Welcome, James.
Hello, Jim. How are you?
I am good.
Welcome back.
Welcome back yourself.
So I think today's topic, we're going to talk about 401k plans
Okay.
from both the employer and employee's perspective.
Interesting.
So what do you think? I'm going to ask you some questions, sort of like if the hot lights were over you and you were being
am I being grilled?
Yes.
All right. I like it.
Here we go.
Fire away.
So why should I contribute to a 401k plan if I'm an employee of a company?
Would you like to retire sometime in the future?
No, I want to work forever.
That's the reason why you would want to put money away, so that you can plan for your retirement and not live day by day working until you're gone.
All right. So the 401k is really a code section within the Internal Revenue Code.
Yes.
So there's a whole host of different codes for
Exactly.
401k and
Yep.
et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
So what is it in particular about that versus some of the other ones?
The 401k allows the employee to put money away for his benefit for future use. That's not part of the employer's money. So it's the employee's money only. If the employee leaves, that money can go with him. The employer has no say or can do anything with it.
So it's portable.
It's portable, but it's also not the employer's money.
Okay, so now basically what has happened in our country, when we look at the history, going back many, many years ago, let's go back 50, 60 years ago, most people worked for a company. They worked 25, 30, 40 years or more, and they left and they got a pension.
Correct.
The 401k plan and the retirement plan has now been foisted upon the employee. It's almost his responsibility.
Correct.
In many ways, or her responsibility to take care of their own retirement. And this is the savings tool, the retirement plan that the company is offering. Now, here's the question I have. Well, this is actually a couple questions. Not every company has a 401k plan.
No, that's correct.
Some companies have other types of plans because they might be smaller. So generally, when you read an article or you hear it in the press or the media, they talk about the 401k plan like everybody has that available to them. That's not necessarily true.
No, you'll find that a lot of your smaller businesses that only have 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5 employees won't have a retirement plan in place. And sometimes what they do is they set up what they refer to as a simple IRA or a SEP IRA, which are just another form of qualified plan that will benefit the employees. But in those cases, the employer is also putting some form of match into it.
Well, they're also putting a match into the 401k plan too.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
In a 401k, it could be just the employee's money going in. The employer doesn't have to do anything. Now, in the old days, going back many moons ago, where an employee would work, that was referred to as a defined benefit plan.
Correct.
And that defined benefit plan was employer's money going into it. And the employee had no say, couldn't tell where the investments go. And it was really fixed upon getting a certain rate of return because you didn't want a lot of volatility to it. And it was determining, based on the amount of money that was going in, it would determine what your benefit would be at the end.
So those are defined benefit plans as opposed to a 401k plan, which is a defined contribution plan.
Correct.
So it's a DB versus a DC,
DC.
as we say in our parlance.
Yes.
Okay, so I want to focus more attention on the defined contribution plan, but it is important for people to understand a defined benefit plan, and that it's not really widely used as much. There are still pension plans that maybe people were grandfathered in, or that some companies might still have them. They might have them in the form of a cash balance pension plan. I don't want to necessarily go down that path.
It's a hybrid between.
It's a hybrid, right? And not only bigger companies, but even smaller businesses have that available too.
Yes.
But let's go back to the 401k plan and matching. So why would an employer set up a 401k plan and not have a match? Or why would he have a match? I would think that you would have a match because you would want to incentivize. But why would you not have a match?
Well, the most recent one that I started, the employers, they weren't sure of their profits and how much that they're going to have available to contribute to the plan. Now, their intentions are down the road to do a match, but they don't have the free money right now because they're a startup. But yet they're trying to retain employees. So that's why they set up the 401k at the moment, because they want to retain employees. It's an incentive for an employee to participate, knowing that at some point in time that they'll have a match going into it. Now, initially, the ideal thing would be to do safe harbors, because what that does is a safe harbor plan allows the employee to know that they're going to get a certain amount of match, depending on how the employer structures. Usually, there's two basic safe harbors. One is where the employer puts in 3%, regardless if an employee contributes or not. And the other safe harbor is designed, it's to incentivize the employee to participate, because what it does is it says we'll do dollar for the first 3%, and then we'll do 50 cents on the dollar for the next 2% the employer puts in, or the employee puts in. So if the employee puts in 5, the total obligation for the employer is 4. But that only goes to those who participate. So it's one or the other, but that's the two basic. Now, you can do a 4% safe harbor or 6% safe harbor, but those aren't as common. Most people either do 3% for all the employees, or they do the second option that I told you.
So I would almost view that if you didn't participate, you're almost leaving a bonus from the employer on the table.
Exactly.
Because it's free money.
Exactly. And a safe harbor is 100% vested from day one. So unlike a traditional matching plan where the employer can set up a way to hold the employee by saying, all right, you have to be with me for a certain period of time. Most of the times it's required for you to be there 6 years, but they do have shorter timelines before you get 100% of the match that I give you. Mm-hmm. Whereas the safe harbor, it's vested from day one. Mm-hmm. But what the employer has been finding is it's that they've been able to acquire better talent sometimes.
So it's talent acquisition and talent retention.
Yes.
And that is one of the ways in which to pull that necessary human resource to have a successful and profitable business.
Yes.
And so it is a tool, and it is also it's solving a couple different problems. Well, it's, the pensions are becoming more of a dinosaur almost in some respects. And so it's being this retirement plan or employee benefit from the employer is being used to acquire talent and retain the talent. And you want to increase the participation. So I want to talk about the participation, because over the years, Congress has passed legislation to encourage higher participation. So that's a twofold issue as well, because if they have a retirement plan in place, you do need to have participation because you could be in violation of certain rules. I don't want to touch on
Testing.
that. I don't want to touch on that quite yet. But you also want to get your employees to be participating because it is to their benefit. So what are some of the things that they've done to incentivize employees? I am aware of, for example, automatic enrollment, opting out if they don't want to be in it, and the percentages that if they were automatically enrolled, what are the percentages? And also going back to the point that you made before is the safe harbor matching contributions, they automatically get that. But how does that work if they are automatically enrolled?
The auto-enrollment, basically, most plans are designed with the auto-enrollment now at 3%. If you're a startup today, you cannot not have it. You have to have auto-enrollment.
New businesses, right?
New businesses.
Beginning 2023?
Correct. So any new 401k as of 2023 has to have the auto-enrollment. Now, unfortunately, it technically didn't take effect until this year. But those plans—
the regulations.
Yes. But that's part of the Secure Act 2.0. But any plan that started after 2023, if they didn't have it in their plan, they have to amend their plan to have auto-enrollment starting going forward. Now, most auto-enrollments start at 3%. You can have it higher if you want, but 3% is the minimum. And what has to happen now, what auto-enrollment does, is that an employee is hired. They go through their eligibility period. Most of the time it's 90 days because that's when your other benefits also kick in.
So is it that was my next question. So it wasn't uncommon many years ago that if you wanted to participate in the 401k plan, you had to be an employee for more than 1 year.
That is correct.
And so that's falling by the wayside as well.
No, the year's still there. They can opt for that. But what happens is it discouraged employees from coming because they want to keep putting into their 401k. So most companies today start at the same time their benefits kick in. So their group benefits could kick in most of the time 90 days out, right. And that's when the 401k kicks in. They do it all at the same time now. Going back to the auto-enrollment, they start at 3%. There's also a rule that you could do auto-escalation, which isn't taken advantage of often. But what that does is every year that the employee's in there, now it bumps up. It could bump up
3 to 4%, 4 to 5%. So that's the percentage of the salary that's going to come out on their behalf and be contributed to the 401k plan.
Yeah. It's usually that 1% per year up until a certain percent. Sometimes I've seen as high as 10.
Oh, really?
Yes. Well, they're trying to make sure that people save enough for their retirement. So they keep pushing it up. And what has to happen is the employee has to go in and elect not to do it.
They have to opt out.
They have to opt out.
Okay. So now let's just, let's take this to the next step. So an employee, whether new or, an older employee, when I say older, been with the company for a long time, not necessarily age older, but they are now participating and it's escalating. 3, 4, 5, 6% is being contributed on their behalf to the plan. If they don't opt out, it's going to continue.
Correct.
What happens to the investments? Because this is an important question. Because ordinarily, you or I, if we were participating, we would have made our investment elections.
Yes.
Because, it's part of our business. We would know enough to say, we're going to contribute 6%, and we're going to make these investment elections across the options that were presented to us that's in this 401k plan. But people that are automatically enrolled, they're not even aware
of their options.
They're not even aware that they may not even be aware that they were automatically enrolled, never mind looking at the investment options. So how does the employer set that up for their employees?
Well, the employer can protect himself by setting up in the beginning what they refer to as a qualified default investment account, a QDIA for short. What the QDIA does is it says, okay, you have an employee who is 30 years old and they will be defaulted to maybe a target date fund of 2060 because they will turn 67 at that point in time, 35 years from now. So that's why or 30 years from now. I did the math wrong, but that's okay.
Right. It's 30 plus years.
Yeah. The idea is that they a lot of times use target date funds as their QDIA. And the target date funds have intervals. So they'll go usually 2010, 2015, 2020, 2025, all the way up to, I just seen some 2070s out there. And that's theoretically the closest age to when that person is going to retire. And that's how they get put into those QDIAs based on their age and their retirement. What happens is the more further you go out, the more concentrated it is of equities and less in bonds. And then as you start getting older, they start decreasing the amount of stocks and increasing the amount of bonds, and it happens automatically for you. So if an employee doesn't go into it, doesn't make any changes, and they end up into this QDIA, most commonly known as target date funds, then they'll be okay, but it may not be what they're looking for.
It may not be ideal,
right?
Certainly. Well, I have my reservations for target date funds in general, how they're managed. But the idea is the younger the individual is, the higher percentage that it's going to be invested and balanced. Well, I shouldn't say balanced, but is going to be more invested in equities. And as you're saying, as they age and move along the span, it's going to reverse.
Shift.
It's almost like a seesaw.
Yes.
Right. So it's going to rebalance so that it's more in the fixed income arena when they're older and closer to retirement, if they make no changes at all.
Correct.
And the problem I have with target date funds is because, there's funds, there's expenses attached to, there's expenses related to the management of the 401k plan by the employer as well.
Yes.
So you're affecting your investment return. So it does behoove the individual, the employee, to know that they have this available to themselves.
Correct.
And that they should, in fact, make changes, if not themselves, then to bring it to someone who's a professional, an advisor, to help with the investment elections based upon the age and stage of their life, where they are. You would agree with that?
I do. When I sit down and enroll somebody into the 401k, first thing I start talking is getting a feel for what their risk tolerance is. And then what I'll do is I'll say, well, this is your default mechanism, but this is the list of all the other investments that are in there that you can pick and choose from. And based on your risk tolerance, I would recommend you going to this over here, and I'll help you guide you through that process. Keep in mind, though, if you don't like the decisions I've made, you can go in and change it at any time because you have access to it, and it's your 401k, no one else's.
Yeah, now that could be overwhelming and underwhelming. And here's what I mean by that.
Yes.
Because there are 401k plans where they are underwhelming with the offerings that they provide. They may not have enough, or the ones that they have are not really good performers.
Yes.
And it could also depend upon the plan sponsor that they were using, whether it's an insurance company or an investment company, like the names we know, Fidelity or Vanguard or Principal, if it's insurance companies.
That gets me into a whole nother
realm, right?
And that's the only one. Then maybe we should have another conversation about what a plan sponsor should look for when they're looking to set up a 401k, because that's a whole nother topic and a whole different set of rules
and issues. Yeah, for sure. But for the individual employee, I've encountered, and I'm sure you have too, where they don't have enough. And then there's ones where you go from one that has 20 offerings or 30, and that's a lot. That could be enough if they're good.
Yes.
Where I've seen 500 funds, and you go, how do you expect these people to choose?
Exactly.
As a professional, I go, oh my God. So I do a process of elimination, basically. If I can get rid of a bunch, I'm not even going to pay any attention to some of them. Then I narrow it down to those choices. But that requires a lot of research too now, to go in and dig in and use the services that we avail ourselves to determine if these funds are good. Do you do anything specifically in that?
Well, when
research?
I help a plan sponsor set up a new 401k, I'm constantly doing research. So what happens is I'll take a look at a fund. There are different platforms out there that use different things to check to see if the fund's adequate for the plan. I go a little bit further because I look at this as long-term planning. There's a program out there called FI 360, and they do an analysis of the plans, of the fund lineup within the plan to see if it's worthy of still being in the plan and it's meeting the requirements. And they'll come in and pull one out after 1 or 2 years because it fell out of their favor. When I look at plans and when I build plans, I look at fund managers. I like having fund managers that are part of the fund or that has been with a fund for at least 5, maybe 10 years, preferably. Because a retirement plan is long-term planning for the most part for most of the people today. They're going to be in that plan 10, 15, 20 years, potentially, if they're still with that same employer down the road. So I try to build that plan so that the fund managers have been there for 5 or 10 years so that the results reflect that of that fund manager. And then I start looking at each one of the funds, making sure that their fees are correct and that they're not overcharging for the services they're providing, and whether or not that fund is beating their peer groups. And one of the other criteria that I do is make sure that that fund manager has his own money in there. Because if he doesn't have his own money in there, why would I want to put my clients in it? So when I'm building a plan for a plan sponsor, I make sure the funds are fitting a certain criteria and that are beating their peer groups on the 5 and 10-year results more than the 1 or 3.
Okay, so this is when you actually help the employer to set up the fund offerings.
Well, what that does is it allows me then to know the funds within the lineup. So I've done a lot of research with regards to the retirement plans, and I know and I'm familiar with the other funds that are being out there offered in 401ks. So I can take and get a feel for whether or not that's a good fund or that's not a good fund. And I've helped many clients with their 401ks, even though I'm not the manager or the person who brought the plan to the table.
You're familiar with it.
I'm familiar with it because of all the research I do.
Okay. Are there better plan sponsors that offer, or is it, I guess my question is,
we're starting to get into the plan sponsor
and
side.
I don't want to really do that. I really want to stick to the but are there better ones, for example, for the employees that you come across that actually do a good job in making a selection, or is it just company to company?
Company to company.
Okay.
The plan sponsor has the obligation of selecting the fund lineup, and they may or may not be aware of it. But a lot of times they rely on whoever they help them set that plan up on their expertise. And I don't know how much expertise a lot of these advisors have with regards to what they recommend, because I find that a lot of plans have hidden fees in them, and I don't even know if the advisors know that they have hidden fees in them.
Most don't, because it's time consuming to find that out anyway. And it's also, I would think, it's not something that they're aware of necessarily.
It's
there's fees, but you don't know what it is.
Right.
And it's not uncommon that even employees, like when we get people that are new clients, it's not uncommon for them to say, well, those are my benefits and it's free. No, it's not free. You're paying for it indirectly. You just don't see it.
Going back to, and I don't want to get into today with regards to the employer, but let's go back to picking a plan.
Mm-hmm.
An employer has different options today is a 401k better than a SEP? Or is a SEP better than a simple IRA?
Or a simple 401k plan?
A simple 401k, yes. So
there's a lot to choose from.
Exactly. And the only thing I can tell the plan sponsor about at this point in time is that you have to do an analysis of each one and get a feel for what would be best for your company at that particular time. Because some are expensive and some are cheaper, but they're cheaper maybe short term, but they're more costly long term. And so then you may have to convert to a different one down the road. You should look at it. The DOL look for you to review your plans every 2 to 3 years.
So there's a lot of administrative expenses for the employer associated with the establishment of a retirement plan for their employees, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
And you just need to do some research. This is where you could really use a good advisor's opinion. And don't use your best friend if he doesn't do qualified plans, because he may not know the difference. Or she may not know the difference, because there are a lot of good quality advisors out there that have experience. But
all right, let's go back to the employee. And we were talking about the Secures Act, being automatically enrolled, and portability. So unlike our fathers who worked for companies for a long time, many people move from job to job.
Yes.
So if they're automatically enrolled and they're really not actively involved in the management of their 401k plan, so it falls into the QDIA, which then is really more often than not a target date fund.
Right.
So now they're being invested. 5 years pass, they go to another job. What do you find? Number one, what do you find more often happens versus what we as advisors would like to see happen? And I think you understand what my question is.
Yeah, what I find happening is they forget all about the plan and they don't move it. They don't convert it to an IRA. They don't move it to their next employer's plan.
Why would we want to do either one of those?
Well, ideally, if you move it to an IRA, you have the advantage of all sorts of investments to pick and choose from. And if you move it to your next employer's 401k, it could benefit you in regards to, unlike an IRA, a 401k technically is better protected from creditors as opposed to, and they have had rulings where IRAs have been touched. And the other advantage is in a 401k, you could take a loan, whereas an IRA, you cannot. And if you're not over the age of 59 and a half, you're going to be subject to a 10% penalty on top of if it's a traditional IRA as opposed to a Roth IRA.
What you do, more often than not, I would suggest that people take it and roll it into an IRA because you have an open universe of investments.
Exactly.
However, there are instances where it does make sense to leave some money or transfer it over to your new employer so that you already have an existing 401k plan.
Exactly.
And if, God forbid, there's an emergency or you need a new car and you got $20,000 in it, you can at least borrow 50% of it.
Correct.
10%, $10,000.
Not to exceed 50.
Yeah,
so
right.
if you got 100,000, you can borrow 50.
So that there's an advantage is what we're really pointing out.
Yes.
In having it. But I know that you've experienced, because I've experienced this quite often, where we get a new client and they give you a list of all their statements. And by the way, do you have other, how many other employers did you work with? I've encountered it at least a handful of times or more where people have had not one, not two, not three, not four, five and six 401k plans that are out there from their prior employers.
And never moved it.
Yeah. And so now you say, you do realize you have a substantial amount of retirement money. Nobody's overlooking this. Nobody is managing this for you.
Right.
And you're with your current employer and you're accumulating more. Don't you think we should consolidate this and make it an investable asset that is being managed?
All too often, it's overlooked and forgotten, just because they get busy and don't realize. I've encountered many clients where just that happened. They have 4 or 5 different 401ks, and you're like, okay. Why?
Yeah, and some of them are small, some of them are big, somewhere anywhere in between. So it's amazing. But yeah, that's also important and often overlooked. And we can provide a real service when it comes to something like that. Now, what are employers doing now that much of the other point I wanted to get into was the recent legislation. I say recent, the last several years, there's been the Secures Act 1 and then 2.
Right.
But what are the key provisions within each one of those legislation that are incentivizing or getting more and more people to contribute to their retirement plans, be it a 401k plan or any other type of plan?
First of all, the Secure Act is allowing auto-escalation and auto-enrollment to take place. And I think that's major because, truth be told, a young person starting out, this is what I told my sons from the beginning. I said, you need to put 10% away for your future. Because if you like to retire at the age of 55, 60, then this is the way you do it, by putting 10% away today. At the time when they first started working, they were 24 and 25, so they got a whole lot of years. And that compounding effect on a pre-tax basis or even on a post-tax basis, and whether you do Roth or the traditional 401k is up to each individual, but by putting that money away, it allows them to accumulate so much more because the dollar they put away today is compounding year after year after year of the interest that it's earning. So if you're having a bad year, yes, it's not going to come. You're going to have a compounding effect of a negative result there, but it's not. The dollars that you have in there are still compounding.
Well, when you compound that with the match that you're receiving.
Exactly.
Which is not considered sometimes in these calculations, but by you advising your boys to do 10%, that's significant. Most people don't make that commitment. They're usually making 3 or 4%, maybe 6%.
When I meet with employees, I tell them to try to get to that 10% as quickly as possible, even if they can't do it today. Because what happens is they spend first and you save what's left. And it should be the other way around. You should build your spending after you get done saving.
Yeah. And it's young people, it's really a hard thing. But if you get paid, I'm just making up a number, get paid $1,000 a week, you really get paid $900.
Yes.
Just put $100 aside.
Yes.
And you didn't get it, you don't see it, you can't spend it. Just put it and then save it. And the ideal way in which to save it is the 401k plan, because you can't take it out. If you take it out, you're going to be penalized and taxed.
Right.
So now you're taking advantage of it being tax deferred and compounded, and the employer match, hopefully.
Right.
And it does add up significantly,
Yep.
especially if you start younger.
It doesn't take long at all to get to $100,000. And then I meet with clients all the time that have close to $1 million, if not more, in their 401ks, just because of the fact that they kept putting away.
But fascinatingly enough, I have a hard time wrapping my head around this when I read these statistics that say the average American has $50,000, $60,000 saved for retirement.
Yes.
Is it that number?
Yes. There's not enough education to help employees to learn to save first.
Okay, so going back to this automatic enrollment, are employers required to or encouraged to have presentations to their employees, or is it strictly done on the time when they sign, they become a new employee, or is it done at both points in time to get people to be participating in the retirement plan?
Well, today it's technically they have to auto-enroll and the employee has to opt out. And he has to go online and say, no, I don't want to contribute.
But do they have education?
They do. Some employers allow education. The employers that I have and still work with, they want it so that when they get a new hire, that person's contacted and walked through the process of being enrolled and educating of the plan. There are employers that I still go out and do sometimes semi-annual or annual meetings.
You do presentation
of just general education.
Yeah.
Letting them know this is where you are, this is what you're doing, this is what the economy's doing. Just giving them information that could hopefully incentivize them to save. When I do sit down one-on-one with people, if they can't do 10%, like I try to get my sons to do, then what I do is I get them to start with them as much as possible, and preferably as much as the match at least. And then what I try to tell them is to get to that 10%. When you get a raise, take half and put it into your savings and take the other half to enjoy, because it's money that you haven't seen yet. And how crucial would that be for an employee to put half of his raise into a 401k? How quickly will he get to that 10% mark? And how will that benefit them when you start compounding out the number to get to that $1 million today, this day and age? I don't even know if $1 million is enough to retire on.
No.
So,
not with what we've experienced over the last
4 years, 5 years.
Yeah. The inflation. $1 million may not cut it. $1 million is not like when we were kids, you used to watch the $1 Million movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's like that's not
today
value,
you have
the same value.
Today you have The Millionaire Next Door. I mean, that book, you'd just be surprised how many people have a good bit in their 401k and still not have enough based on their standard of living that they've grown accustomed to.
So you made a good point too before about getting raises. So when not only putting part of your raise in your salary into your retirement plan, but wouldn't you also want to increase the percentage that you're contributing to the plan itself?
You can, but if they increased it, they would have to decrease their spending. Most of the time when I'm sitting with employees, they're living paycheck to paycheck.
That's true.
So getting them to save something like the raise that they just got is a step in the right direction. Getting them to put more away is difficult. That's what the auto-escalation, the idea behind auto-escalation is to take a percentage of the raise and put it into the retirement plan.
Okay, to that point now, what is the maximum allowable amount that you can contribute to your 401k plan?
100% of your salary, depending on your age, not to exceed, if you're
Under the age of 50?
Yeah, under the age of 50, I believe it's, now I got to do the math.
It's 20, is it
23.5
yeah.
or 24? It may be 24 for this year.
Plus another 6,500. I think
7,500.
It's 75. So it gets to 31,000.
Right.
So, all right. So that's a significant amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
If a person is able to put that much away.
Yes.
But the average person isn't really making a salary of, let's say $100,000, and they're putting really 25% of their salary away pre-tax.
Right.
That's sizable. That's
Yes.
significant. So when you think of a person who's making 50, 60, or 70,000, they're not putting $24,000 away. It's not happening.
No.
However, this is where we go back and we really want to emphasize the fact that regardless of how much you earn in your salary, it really is incumbent that you are putting something away if you have not been automatically enrolled. If you are automatically enrolled, it's also somewhat your responsibility to make sure you're looking at where these investments are, whether it's the QDIA, which is the target date funds. Is that the best thing? Maybe not. You want to look to see where you could improve that.
Yes.
So you want to improve your overall results from the investment, which help to grow the plan itself so that you do have more money come retirement or age 59 and a half when maybe you do retire or maybe you need to access it and you're not going to be hit over the head with a penalty for taking an early distribution if you needed to for whatever the reason.
Correct.
Okay. So is there anything else that we should cover that we haven't with regard to this as far as the employee is concerned?
Well, the employee should know that the money's 100% theirs with regards to what they contribute. They should also understand that they can take it with them and move it to an IRA or to their next employer's plan.
Or both.
Or both. And they shouldn't leave it behind or forget about it because you just don't know how much the fees are within a 401k contract.
Or what happens if the company that they leave goes bankrupt?
Well, it doesn't hurt them.
But exactly.
But the plan could theoretically come to an end and you need to move it then at that point anyway. Otherwise, it gets turned over to potentially the state.
And then you have to go find it.
Then you have to go find it. Yeah. But no, I think the main thing that an employee should look to do, or somebody who's just starting out, is to get to, in their younger ages, get to that 10%, learn to save first, spend what you have left. And if you can't do it, then start doing as much as you can to get as much of the match that the employer will do. But mainly, overall, you got to do it for yourself.
Okay. One other question. I'm sure I'll come up with others, but
okay.
How often should an individual look at the performance of their account?
I usually tell all my employees that I sit with to review their plan once a year.
A minimum?
Yep. Just once a year.
Couldn't you?
Because if they start tracking the markets with all the volatility, they make poor decisions sometimes, and they try to time the market instead of the time in the market. So I always recommend that they look at it once a year. First of all, to make sure that all their money's got into it. And second, to just see how the investments are doing.
Right. Now, there would be nothing wrong if you looked at it on a quarterly basis. You don't,
Not at all.
And I think it's at a minimum, certainly once a year. I think twice a year is a good idea. And if you have an advisor working with you, maybe they look at it 3 or 4 times a year. But generally, if they're on track, you're not going to make major, wholesale changes. You might be tinkering with it because I think Hopefully you and I are smart enough to know that we're not going to try timing the market, because that we don't believe in that philosophy anyway. However, it may make sense to make some adjustments because, well, one sector of the portfolio or the funds may have really performed very well. And now whatever allocation we had, we have to reallocate to rebalance it. So they're not doing that if they're letting it just sit.
Well,
and it's also
true.
It's being overlooked.
Yeah. Now, there are features with a lot of the record keeper platforms that will allow you to automatically rebalance once a year. But I usually try to get my employees to just take a look at it once a year to figure things out. But you're right. You could look at it as often as you want. The thing is not trying to time the market, though, and changing up your funds. What you want to do is meeting your objectives. And are the funds performing the way you want them to perform?
Okay, so let's wrap this up then.
Okay.
A couple of key points that we should think about.
Save. Save, save. Nobody's going to do it for you.
Those are the 3 points.
Yes.
Save, save, save. It's like real estate, right? Location. I think that's fine. I think that's good. Save, save, save. And when in doubt, look for professional advice.
Exactly.
All right, Jim. Until next time, I think we're going to talk about the employer's perspective.
I think that would be awesome.
Very good.
Have a good night.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Enlightened Wealth Strategies. We hope you found today's discussion insightful and inspiring.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow and subscribe to our podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcast, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform to stay updated on new episodes.
Your financial journey doesn't end here. Connect with us online for even more resources and exclusive content.
Until next time, remember, financial enlightenment is just an enlightened wealth strategy away. Investment advice is offered through Bell Point Asset Management, LLC, 500 Demont Ranch, Parkway Building 700, Unit 700, Reno, Nevada, 89521. Additional information about Bell Point Asset Management is available on the SEC's website at www.advisorinfo.sec.gov. It is important to read our disclosures available at this link, www.bellpointasset.com/disclosures. The information provided in this presentation is educational and limited to the dissemination of general information. This material is not intended to be a recommendation of any kind, investment, tax, or accounting advice. Does not constitute a solicitation to buy, sell, or hold a security or an investment strategy. Engage in any financial transaction and is not provided in a fiduciary capacity. The information provided does not take into account the specific objectives or circumstances of any particular investor or suggest any specific course of action. Investment decisions should be made based on an investor's objectives and circumstances and in consultation with his or her financial professionals. While the advisor uses reasonable efforts to obtain information from sources believed to be reliable, the advisor makes no representation that the information or opinions contained in this material are accurate, reliable, or complete. All information and opinions contained in this material are subject to change without notice. The views and opinions expressed are for informational and educational purposes only as of the date of the production or writing and may change without notice at any time based on numerous factors such as market or other conditions, legal and regulatory developments, additional risks and uncertainties, and may not come to pass. This material may contain forward-looking information that is not purely historical in nature. Securities offered through Fortune Financial Services, Inc., member FINRA and SIPC, Bell Point Asset Management, LLC, and Fortune Financial Services, Inc. are not affiliated. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Investing involves risks. Principal losses possible.